Today we're going to be exploring the highest level legends in Brawlhalla. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't every legend going to be level 100? And well, yes and no. Because today we're going to be looking at the players with the highest XP earned. For those of you who didn't know, it takes around 1 million, or 1,088,462 XP to be exact, to get from level 1 to 100 on any legend. So keep in mind when you see a number like 10 million XP, that player could have gotten 10 different legends to level 100 instead. And if any of you want to check out the leaderboards for yourselves, I'll leave a pinned comment and link in the description to all resources used to make this video and timestamps for all legends as well. For Ada, surprisingly, the crown doesn't go to Crocky, who sits all the way down in the 7th spot. The number 1 spot goes to King Chris with over 4.6 million XP and almost a full million over 2nd place. Like the rest of this list, all of this is subject to change, but this one is particularly interesting because the top 4 are all extremely close to each other, being between 1.9 and 2 million XP, and Crocky making another appearance but yet again being beaten out for the top spot, this time falling short to Jam 15. For Artemis, the gap between the top 2 is not nearly as close, with the difference between 1st and 2nd being a whole 500,000 XP. This time going to EU player Mordex at 5 million XP, or around level 500. Asuri has the first mention of Brazil so far, with the player Little Balloon, or so I think that's what his username is supposed to mean, with an impressive 4.1 million XP or level 400. I'm not certain about this at all, but the top player for Azoth looks like a Heidi account for Snowy. Either way, that 2600 ELO is very respectable, and so is the almost 5 million XP. Barraza just might be Brazil's sleeper pick because the 3 highest level Barrazas are all Brazilian players and 4 out of the top 7. The highest of them all is a player who goes by the name of Bossman and sits at around 4.5 million XP. Bodvar is another interesting one, whereas 2nd place's 4 million XP is nothing to scoff at. The top spot almost has 2nd and 3rd places combined with 6.6 million XP, or around 650 levels. Also shout out to 6th and 7th place, I thought their names were pretty funny. I'm really surprised Brynn's mastery isn't higher, since she's been around forever and always seems to be a decent meta pick, but her highest is at 4.3 million XP, a cool million above 2nd place. I didn't think the Middle Eastern scene was big enough to top the leaderboards, so shout out to Legendary Gamer for just slightly beating out 2nd place by only 100,000 XP, which if you look at the gap between 2nd and 3rd, it really isn't that much. Getting to level 100 is no joke, especially when you do it 5 times over. Cassidy is seemingly another Brazilian favorite, and what can I say, they have great taste. Whether you agree with that or not, you can still admit 5.6 million XP on Cassidy is pretty impressive. Cross has an abysmally low mastery rate with Pavelski managing to break the top 25, and I doubt he's really trying to maintain his spot or anything. And if that wasn't proof enough, the top 50 aren't all level 100 yet. The highest XP on Cross goes to Emperor Freed with almost 4 million XP. I feel like Diana flies under the radar quite a bit, but she's definitely a solid pick. And player Drago seems to think so too, with a very nice 5.7 million XP. It's no surprise that Dusk is this underplayed, with even as high as 7th place getting eerily close to being under level 100 themselves, and the highest Dusk only having 3.2 million XP, which, if you've been keeping track, is the 2nd lowest so far behind Arcadia. Ember has pretty much one loyalist, and let's just say he's pretty loyal, with the gap between 1st and 2nd place slowly increasing. The highest level Ember has 5.2 million XP, almost doubling the XP of 2nd place. Okay, never mind what I was just saying about loyalists, because look at Ezio loyalist Chef Webster and his nearly 4.5 million XP, almost 3 times as much as 2nd place, who's barely even level 100 themselves. If there's any legend you can easily get into the top 50 list with, it's definitely Ezio, only requiring a measly level 59. Forgive me, Fry, I was not familiar with your game. But honestly, who's surprised about Fry being the highest level? Fait. What I am surprised about is the almost 6.5 million XP on such a mid character. But oh well, to each their own. Gnash has existed since before Odin ever orchestrated the Grand Tournament. So it comes as a massive shock to me that there aren't even enough level 100s to fill the top 50 list. But shout out to Earthboy for persevering and being the first and only level 400 Gnash. Crocky making his 3rd appearance already is also pretty wild. Hattori has and will always be a fan favorite, so the only thing surprising about this one is that the XP being this low. I was expecting our first 10 million, but you can't complain when the top 7 are all higher than the last entry. And over level 600 is still crazy work, I must add. Imugi is next, and he actually has a decent amount of level 100s, despite still being one of the newer legends. The highest level Imugi sits at 2.1 million XP, which is already higher than Arcadia, who came out a full 2 years prior. Okay, so weirdly enough, Isaiah of all legends currently has the 3rd highest XP of the video, which, if you've been paying attention, only gets pushed out of the top by legends who've been playable since the alpha. This is pretty much thanks to one loyalist, AdamCool178, and I can't help but respect him for it. Jaeyun fans are usually pretty intense, so it's no mystery how there's so many level 100s on this legend, representing almost every region with just the top 7 alone. One man stands tall above the rest, however, with over double the XP of 2nd place and our 4th legend with over 6 million XP. Jhala is extremely underrated, with only 25 players reaching level 100 in total, and player Tweakin100 takes that top spot with a healthy 4 million XP, or just short of 400 levels. Jiro's a weird one because nobody really uses or talks about this legend, and yet the silent loyalists keep grinding in the background, all the way up to over 5.4 million XP by player aptly named Jiro to death. Shockingly, Impala isn't the highest level Kaya, unless he changed his name and moved to Brazil, but if not, the top spot goes to Kai, with a solid 4.3 million XP. Special shoutout to player IV Meta X for being the only level 100 King Zuva in Brawlhalla, and it's not even close. The 2nd and 3rd place are only at level 73, which is less than halfway to level 100. This one seems pretty easy, and I might even start grinding King Zuva myself. I guess Koji must have fell off in 2021, because it looks like the XP probably hasn't moved since then. I know a lot of legends don't even have an XP count this high, but this is a legend played by a lot of pros, and they usually tend to be character loyalists. If you don't believe me, just watch any recent tournament and try and count the gold nameplates. Respect to Zinker for holding it down with 3.8 million XP. Core is one of those legends that flies under the radar, but globally recognized as a sort of sleeper top tier. This legend probably has the most diverse top 50 list so far, with a pretty even representation from all regions, but the highest level goes to this guy whose name I'm gonna butcher, with a decent 4.1 million XP. Lin Fei is a pretty underrated legend, with only a handful of level 100s, and the majority of them stopped playing as soon as they reached it. All except for our Lord and Savior himself, Jesus Christ, who is sitting in high plat with over 1,500 games played and a healthy 4.2 million XP. I guess Loki must be everybody's least favorite Scythe legend, because there are barely a dozen level 100s out there, and besides King Zuva, who you could still argue is fairly new, is the lowest XP shown so far, at a measly 1.6 million XP. If you could imagine any character to break 7 million XP, who would you say? Lord Vraxx? I definitely wouldn't have. And not even once, but twice, with 2 players battling it out in the mid-off, at a very insane 7 million and 7.5 million XP respectively. Some of these numbers seem extremely low, with another legend sitting at 3 million XP, Lucien. All of the top 7 are relatively close, and any one of them could end up moving up to first, but for now, that goes to player JC Kid. Before doing the research for this video, I was fairly certain Magyar was pretty much untouched, except for maybe a handful of loyalists, and maybe that remains true, but these loyalists are very loyal. I was definitely not expecting 4.2 million XP on the character, and that's no disrespect to Magyar or any of his fans. I personally picture Mako mains as Jaeyun players who want to seem unique, but one player I can safely say isn't like that is Koala, who sits proudly at the top of the Mako leaderboard with 3.5 million XP. I'm not surprised at all there are quite a few Mirage loyalists out there, with all the way down to 9th place being better than some of the other legends I've talked about so far. But the top 4 blow them all away, with Shadra leading the pack at a hefty 6.5 million XP. This should not be blowing anybody's mind, but Mordex is up next, and we have a new XP record, set by E2 Soto with 7.77 million XP and a whopping 3 million XP difference from 2nd place. What I am surprised about, however, is that there's only one Mordex player that high up. I expected at least one other player with 5 million or more XP. Munin must be another disappointment to the Scythe community, as we only have 12 level 100 Munins currently, and none of them exceptionally high, with the highest being merely 2.3 million XP, which is amongst the lowest so far. And more surprisingly, the 2nd Scythe legend featured at the bottom. I actually expected Nyx to be a higher level than Mordex, but she falls short at around 5.5 million XP, by player Halo Prince, who you might have heard of. and second place creeping up with over 5 million XP of their own. Onyx is a very solid pick, who you see a lot more in 2s, and I honestly don't think this list shows how popular she is at high-level play. The highest level Onyx goes to Vinely, who sits at over 3 million XP or level 300, which I consider on the lower side. Okay, so Orion might not be the highest level legend in this video, but depending on what metric you'd use, you might actually consider him the most popular legend in all of Brawlhalla, with the entire top 50 list ranging from a minimum of 2.5 million XP and the highest having a whopping 6.6 million XP. Petra goes back to normalcy, with player Fraudy leading with a respectable 3.3 million XP. So since King Zuva only had a singular level 100, how many do you think Priya has so far? 1? 2? How about 7? This character is definitely the Jaeyun of Chakrams, and I can see these numbers being drastically different in a year's time. But for now, the highest sits at 1.6 million XP. I'm not too sure what I was expecting for Queen Nai, but shout out to Tanatada, who is the first Japanese player who has been showcased in this video so far. The top player, however, is Vagopool with 4.2 million XP. Ragnar is up next, and I could have sworn my friend who's been a level 100 Ragnar for years would be on this list. But the top spot goes to Christ is God, who apparently broke their foot and has 3.8 million XP on Ragnar. This video took so long to come out, even Ransom has a level 100 on the leaderboard now. And second place is already 5 levels higher than King Zuva's second place, so let that sink in. It's cold outside. I'm not surprised that Bunny ends up being the highest level Rayman, since I even made a short about her insane Rayman plays in tournament. But 7.6 million is a crazy amount of XP, and almost more XP than the highest Mordex player, which is no easy feat. Interestingly, Radish doesn't take the top spot for Red Raptor, as that goes to the Joker, or as Harley Quinn likes to call him, Dr. J, with around 3.7 million XP. Reno is about as low as you'd expect him to be, with only a dozen level 100s total, and the highest one being Lemon Tooth, with just under 2.5 million XP. I don't know whether I should admire or despise Scarlet Mains, but either way, the top player ranks amongst the highest of the video so far, with 6.7 million XP by player Navarro. Seeing Sentinel so low is kinda sad, but what do you expect? He's pretty unpopular. 2.5 million XP still way higher than I've got on any character though, that's for sure. With the newer legends like 7, you sorta have to give them a pass, but I still feel like 2.1 million XP is on the lower end. I get it though, since I don't play canon either. Now for Sidra, we have a pretty decent representation with player Yo Exility at the top with 4.5 million XP. For a Lance legend, Sir Roland is shockingly low with only around half the top 50 being at level 100, and the highest of them being Gloomy, sitting at 3 million XP. Taros is about as popular as you'd expect with 4 different regions showing up in the top alone, and the highest of them all having a whopping 7.5 million XP, the third highest of the video so far. Even though his release was 3 years ago, I'd still consider Teska a fairly new legend. Having said that, the highest of the bunch is the Teska god himself, or Tesgod with 3.8 million XP. Despite him being around since practically the beginning, I expected Thatch to be towards the bottom of the list, but amazingly, the highest level Thatch has just under 5.7 million XP. There aren't many level 100s for Thea, with there being less than a dozen overall, with the highest barely reaching 1.7 million XP, and sits amongst one of the lowest in the entire game. Thor is pretty underrepresented overall, but the top player, Unfocused, seems to like him with a respectable 3.8 million XP on this legend. Now for Ulgrim, who you either really love or really hate, and I can tell you with the utmost certainty that player Saphir is definitely in the love category with the highest XP of the video so far, standing at 7.8 million. Back-to-back fan favorites here with Val up next, and she's no different with the highest level player Bio, being around a million under Ulgrim at 6.8 million XP. Now for Vector, who surprisingly doesn't end up as the lowest XP in this video, with 2.7 million XP by this guy, whose name definitely isn't true. Of course, Vivi has less level 100s than Priya already, with only 6 in total. The highest is player 2.6 with 1.5 million XP and 20 elo off diamond. Lock in, bro. You're almost there. Volkov actually gets a lot of love for a legend I barely see in-game, but as you all know, Volkov is on top. And the Volkov who is the most on top is player RJ, with over 5.5 million XP. Wushang is competing with Orion for the most impressive top 50 list, ranging from as low as 2 million XP to over 6.2 million XP. The only thing I'm shocked about with this one is how Wushang didn't end up being the most popular legend overall. Zul must be an icon in Hollywood or something, because in the top 50 alone we have Drake, Ja Rule, Bon Jovi, and even UK rapper JK. I'm kidding, obviously, but respect to the highest level Zul at over 5 million XP. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, and you'll see that no, the thumbnail is actually not clickbait. Although it is slightly outdated by this point because pro player Fizaru is at the top of the Yumiko leaderboard with a very impressive 10.5 million XP and stands as our highest level legend in the entire game. And lastly, we have Zariel, who I probably haven't seen in-game for years, but despite that, the silent grinders are at it again with a surprising 4.1 million XP at the top, which is better than half the legends in this video, so I'll give them the credit they deserve. Who did you expect to be the highest level legend? Do you have any level 100s yourself? If you made it this far, special shout out to you, because believe it or not, this video took forever to make, and I wouldn't be here without your continued support. Comment Cardi my slime, so I know you're a real one, and thank you so much for watching. If you have any ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.